Angie,
John,
what would you say is my best coaching skill?
you need an answer right now?
Well, yes, that would be good.
Still thinking.
Oh, come on. It can't be that hard to answer.
You know what? Ask me again at the start of the next episode.
Well, thanks a lot. Let's start the show.
I'm ready.
Welcome to the Coaching Clinic with John and Angie, the show for professional coaches that explores the ins and outs of coaching, from working with clients through to running and marketing your coaching business.
If you're a professional coach who's committed to your own personal and professional growth, cares about making a difference, and wants to have a successful coaching business, you're in the right place.
My name's John Ball.
And I'm Angela Bezignano.
Between us, we have over 50 years of coaching experience and best practices to share with you. From getting started to scaling up your business.
We know what works and what doesn't, as well as what it really takes to have a successful and thriving coaching business.
With new episodes every Wednesday.
Make sure you're subscribed to get them fresh.
Okay, last time we talked about coaching traits, like what makes a good coach. But we also know that there are skills that you need to have as a coach. So in this episode, we thought it would be a really good idea to give a bit of an overview about what the skills are that you ideally need to have as a coach. Now, we'll try and give as many as possible. We might not hit everything that's out there and available for you, but let's kick this off. And Angie, what do you think are some of the top skills or most important skills that a coach should have?
Well, I'm going to go in with, and sorry, because I'm sure you're probably thinking the same, but I'm going to start with that whole listening. Listening is absolutely a skill. It's a lost skill because none of us do it, right? So I definitely think being able to be present and listening for cues. That's huge.
Now, we had said before that was a good trait for a coach as well. But as a skill, how do you become a good listener? How do you become someone who is good at being present with clients, with other people?
You know what's so funny that you say that? Because I'm thinking back to like way back, and I remember that I'm that shiny object person. I'm literally like, la, squirrel, right? I just know that about myself. So I literally had to set up my space to have as little distraction as possible. Literally, like shut the shades, make sure that there is no other sound in the room, nothing else. The ceiling fan is off. Anything that could potentially be a distraction for me was, and it would literally, it sounds silly, but that was the first thing I had to do.
Yeah. It makes sense to me. Do you feel like active listening and that whole thing of that, making sure that you're going the yeses and the ums and and nods in the right places, all that kind of stuff? Do you feel that that's an important part of this?
I'm gonna go with a soft yes. I think, I think it's a little bit difficult because, be on the other side of it, right? And that's something that I've had to do is when I'm evaluating my sessions at the end of the week and saying, hey, what went really well? What was not so great? What can I improve? I do it with you and I sometimes. Like if I'm listening to one of our recordings and you're like saying something, and I'm like, I'm like, ooh, that's a little distraction. It's a little distracting. So I think like it's a soft yes, because I want them to know that I am listening, because I know it can be, it's a little intimidating for the person on the other side to not know if you're there. Because we talked about this. I don't do, if I can avoid it, I don't do Zoom. I don't do any video coaching. Everything I do is on the phone. So yeah, so I have to make sure that I'm actively listening. What are you smiling about? What?
No, I'm agreeing. I'm very much smiling because I agree with this. I think it's definitely more relevant to make sure that your client knows that you're listening when you are on an audio-only coaching call. I think you can get away with it probably on video calls or certainly in person. But I would say that there is a real skill to listening well to people that I think mostly just needs to be developed and practiced in sessions. Not super easy to learn, but there's a really awesome book I read a while back by a lady called Nancy Klein, and it's called Time to Think. Really lovely book, and it's all about giving people the space, holding the space for them without trying to lead them or push them to the next question, but actually just giving them the space to think about what they want to answer. Certainly give them some material to chew on and to think about, but then actually just holding that space for them and not active listening, not making any noise, really just waiting for them to answer, not to make it an awkward silence, but really just to put them in a position where they can speak and answer. Though it was really quite lovely as a book. I'd highly recommend it to people. But for me, it really emphasized one of the aspects of coaching. Like, we don't need to do that in all of our coaching sessions, but we should be able to do that where it's relevant with a client, to say, I'm just going to hold space for you. Have some time to think about this and take your time and be okay with the silence.
I agree. I think that easily, and that's a great segue, because I think as coaches, like when I first became a coach, I know that I had moments of feeling like I needed to fill the space. And as a result of that, I would then start talking or asking the next follow-up question or reframing the question, and learning to give it a period of time for a client to chew on it is so important, because my mind goes at 900 miles an hour, as we all know. And that's not always great, right? Because I tend to go to the end and work my way back. And my coach will tell you, it takes me a minute to find my way. And not everybody's built like that. So learning how to hold the space and allow somebody to process, obviously finding the balance though, because sometimes they're just, well, and if I feel like too much time has passed, I might follow up with, how does that question sound? Or do you need me to re-ask the question in a different way, reframe the question? But again, I know people will say, how long? I think you have to read the room and get to know that client. And if it is taking like a full 60 seconds, you probably need to come back in right before that and say, hey, hello, you still there? Is this thing on? That kind of a thing. But I'm poking a little bit of fun, but I do think it's really important to hold that space and allow them time to process.
I think that's part of the being present. That's where you really tune in to what's going on with them emotionally, energetically. You have a sense of, are they still really thinking about this, or are they tuning out, or is their mind suddenly washed away to what they need to buy at the supermarket or something like that? You know, it's like, you do pick up on these things, even if you don't see them. If you're just on an audio call, you can still pick up and sense these things. Really need to be tuned in. I think that there's an element that comes with this of good coaching skills, certainly important initially, or can be important initially, is the ability to create good rapport with your clients.
I agree. I think it's important to do that, but I think, of course, we need to have good rapport. Otherwise, the trust doesn't get built. We need that. But I think how we do it is really important. I was actually, before you said that, I was thinking, stay away from the chit chat in the very beginning. Hey, how are you? How's the kids? How's this? And the weather and da-da-da-da. And before you know it, 7-8 minutes is gone on chit chat. I've observed it when I'm training coaches. I've watched coaches, and if you're not looking at the time, you don't really recognize. It doesn't seem like, this is taking too long. And I know that a lot of people do that to build rapport. Let me relate to you as a human and talk about, and I'm not saying that if you know something is going on, let's just say, I don't know, somebody was having surgery, a spouse or a child or whatever, something, that you don't come in and say, hey, how is that going? Because that shows care and empathy and all the things, and that's important. But I've watched it over and over that many coaches, when they're trying to build rapport, they waste up to 10 minutes on small talk and chit chat. Not a good look.
I will nearly always tend to start a session with a very quick, how have things been going since we last spoke? And that's really what I'm going to ask them. Certain clients in the past, there's been a need to sometimes say, is there anything you want or need to get off your mind before we get into today's session? but you generally know who you need to do. You have a sense of who you need to do that with in those situations. But I might have a slightly different take on this. I've talked before about doing NLP trainings, and they teach you rapport skills in NLP training, which is great. It's good to have them. However, rapport is generally assumed. I'm going to take it this way. Like, it's generally assumed it's something we naturally do. If you don't have good natural rapport with a client who you're working with, it might actually be a sign that they're not a good client for you to work with.
Right.
So do you really want to be pulling out those rapport skills where you can get the rapport with them? I think you have to make a judgment call with that. I am very much of the mind of, if I don't have a natural rapport with the client, I just feel like I'm always going to have to be working hard at keeping rapport with them.
Let's see, I agree and disagree. And I agree because what you're saying is absolutely true. I'm thinking about my own experiences, and this is interesting. Sometimes people come into coaching, right? They do it willingly. They hire you. They know we talk about expectations and things like that before we actually start the program. But some people aren't as ready as they believe that they are. So I don't judge it by sessions 1 or 2, but if I get to session 3 and I'm feeling hesitancy or anything like this, I don't work. And if I feel like there's hesitation, or if it just feels off, right? I will literally say, let's take a pause. And I will ask them, I will re-evaluate with them the necessity at this time for coaching. And if they are like, yeah, affirming that this is what they want, and I have to then decide, is there a breakthrough I need to have? Because sometimes it's a test, and an unintentional test by the client, because they're just not willing, extracting. But it's almost like once you pop the top and it starts to flow. And you as a coach, you need to be able to define that and differentiate. So we don't want you like tossing people to the side and saying, hey, this is just not going to be a good fit. I think there are some steps that we can and need to take in order to decide that.
Yeah. But I do agree.
Well, do you think so? I think I made a statement, and this is just a personal assessment of mine. Do you think, again, 1 may not be the space, 2 is still a little bit of a warm-up. You know what date 3 means, right? But by number 3, we should have there should be at least some traction.
Yeah.
And, and
so I think that's why I say with that, if I feel that there's no rapport with a client, it's a sign that it might be hard to work with. But I'm probably not going to make that decision completely in the very first session unless it's really bad. And it's just like, no, this is awkward, this is horrible, this isn't going to work. And I may not want it to. That's rare, but it's really just that initial sense is that, all right, this could be challenging. Let's see what comes. But there's another aspect to it where I think as a coach, it's not always good to have too much rapport anyway. I think you need enough rapport to get some, as you say, get some traction, get some flow into the session. But you really don't want to be super in rapport to a level where perhaps you and I might be in rapport because we talk so much and we get on so well. Like, we have really good rapport. That could make it challenging if one of us were in the client position and the other with the coach. It could, because there's the different level of closeness there, or more that there's not the level of detachment that is ideal for being able to keep a sort of helicopter view and a level of detachment in coaching.
Sure.
So the people who are going too much into rapport may also be the kinds of people who are being too much of a friend with their clients rather than a coach with them.
Yeah. Likability is important, but I have said to clients in the beginning, right, you don't really have to like me as the person, because what I do as Angie when I'm not a coach is really none of anybody's business. Sounds really kind of crappy to say that, but who I am and what I do is really none of anybody's business to some degree, right?
Yeah.
Who I am as a coach is what you need to focus on. Because I do have people that will come into those first sessions and they're bubbly or outgoing and they want to just know, they're genuinely just curious because they don't even understand what the relationship of a coach and a client really is supposed to be. So I lay all of this out in that initial, like before we get into session 1, if they say, yeah, I think that I want to do this, I say, okay, let's set up some expectations. I'm not your mama and I'm not your best friend, but I am here because the trust, the rapport is where that trust starts to build, I think. So you need to make sure you're laying the groundwork to establish that trust so that people are, I'm sure you and I can agree to this, and I've said this so many times. I have conversations with clients that they would not ever or have not ever had with the most important people in their lives, spouse, family, friends, whomever. I make sure that I'm not giving somebody the $500 cup of coffee, so to speak. I want to do work with them. And the more trust that I am able to establish, the more I just notice this, the better the outcomes are for them. The discovery is just so much more impactful for them. So there's a reason for that.
That's part of where rapport comes in.
Mm-hmm.
But there are a number of things that help to establish trust. And part of that, I think, is displaying a level of competence. And again, it's not so much, I think that's more traits than skills. But I do think there are ways you can learn how to build trust with people. So trust building is a skill. Trust itself is a trait, I guess.
No, I agree. I definitely agree. And it's such a fine line between skill set and traits. And a lot of them do. Yeah, and a lot of them do overlap. I think another really important, and I'm going to call this a skill, and I think that some people might say that's just something that you do. I'm going to call it a skill, is to prepare for your sessions.
Oh, yeah.
It's definitely a competency. Sometimes it's easy when you have 1 or 2 clients, but when you have 15 or 20 clients a week, and I wish that for all of you, if that's what you aspire to, rock on with your bad selves. I hope that's what you get. But understand, I've done that. I've done 30. And it took me time to figure out my sweet spot. Okay. My ideal is probably 23 a week is what I can handle mentally, emotionally, all the things with my energy. But I do think that preparation, there should be some components. Don't just go and read like old notes and things. Like when you get up to the point where you have several clients, it does become a little bit more challenging to keep some of the details in order, right? A client should not have to come into a session and say to you, well, don't you remember that, Angie? We said that last time. That is not something you want. What you actually want is several sessions later being able to say to somebody, hey, John, don't remember when you said to me, how does that apply here? When you start to stitch sessions and stories and things together for them, they are absolutely mesmerized by that, because then they go, she really gets me, she is listening, and she hears me. That is awesome. That is something that I feel like is invaluable as a coach, and preparation is the key to that. Know your people, know your client. Don't just do a session, call it done, send a couple of notes and say, okay, next, who's next? That's not a good look.
No, I 100% agree with you. And keeping track of where your clients are is something that gets easier over time anyway, especially if you only have a handful of private clients, but it does get easier. Some things will stick in your brain more than others as well. If you just have a handful of clients, it can be quite easy to keep on top of it. And when you're experienced at doing that, it gets a bit easier anyway. It's kind of like you start keeping mental tabs open with your clients as to come back and check in with stuff. But those tabs will eventually get closed. It's what they call the Zeigarnik effect, if you've ever heard of that, which is like It was a psychologist called Bloom Zaganik, and she'd done this study into how waiters in restaurants would remember these massive orders without writing stuff down. And she was amazed by that.
I am always mesmerized by that, by the way.
Yeah, it's incredible, right? But what she also found was once the order was delivered, if she asked them what people had ordered, it was gone. Because they only kept the tab open for as long as they needed it. So this has been studied and called the Zaganik effect. Like, we can keep these mental tabs open for as long as we need them, and then they get closed again. So don't be surprised if after you're no longer working with that client, so wasn't there some important stuff we're working on that it might not come back to you? The mental tabs are closed. But this is part of the way our brains work. Sometimes we'll keep things open when we know we need to refer to them or come back to them. But why not also give yourself that helping hand of keeping good notes? I've always found it's good to prepare for your sessions, not just to know where you've left off, what you might want to check in on with your clients, but also to prepare yourself emotionally, be energetically prepared for your sessions as well. Be intentional before you even get into your sessions for the outcomes that you want to help your clients create. And then make some good notes afterwards. Like, good notes for you and for them after your session is also part of your preparation for your next session.
Yeah. And I think, yes, all of that. It's also very true. It's not just preparation for them. One of the things that I had to do, and it was the learn as I go situation, is that I had to take breaks in between sessions. A lot of people, what they try to do is just, I know some coaches that do back-to-back sessions. I don't know. I have to pee. Sorry. I need the restroom.
I like the idea of it, but no, I need breaks as well.
Well, think about that, though, because what happens is, if you really think about it, if you all of a sudden, I drink a ton of water, right? I live in the desert, and I need those breaks. I need them because I need to just go refresh, and I've had it happen, obviously, that's why it's coming up, but I don't want to be sitting in a session with somebody and being like, my God, I don't have 15 minutes. I'm distracted. It's just really good business and proper functionality of a session. You don't want to be distracted. That's the first thing. The second thing is we have to keep an eye on our energy and our ability to show up without, and this is something that I do. I learned this. Brendan Burchard is, obviously everybody knows, well, you should, like, he's coach and he's amazing. I do love him. And one of his teachings is called a release meditation technique. And I'm going to say this flat out. I'm not one of those people that's all, I'm going to go meditate. There's things that I do that aren't like, I'm not sitting there like, that's not me. I will go sit in nature and quiet, and that's meditation for me. I do those things. But what I noticed is if you go to the finest restaurants, what they do is in between each portion of the meal, right, they will come with like sherbet. And the reason they give you the sherbet, it's like lemon or something, is to cleanse your palate. So I call it the cleansing of my emotional palate, because I don't want to bring the energy from my house, right, my personal self, or I don't want to bring my energy from my workday home, right? So, and in between, I don't want to bring, good or bad, I want to show up as organically ready for a session as possible so that I am receiving information objectively. That's what I want. So in between coming into the door, right now I work from home, right? So when I close my office door, I sit down and I do this meditation. It's about 2.5 minutes. And I do it at the end of the day. And I literally do it in between each of my sessions. Go do my thing, use the restroom, get my water, eat lunch, keep myself, do a couple of jumping jacks, like whatever it is I have to do to keep myself energized because I'm sitting at my desk all day. I will do this right before I get into the next session. And I love it because, again, for somebody like me who has the attention span of a flea, I definitely love doing this because I am able to keep that energy in its place. It's really, are you familiar with it or no, John?
Not with that particular meditation, but I am familiar with the idea of having some sort of ritualistic practices. And I certainly used to do that a lot more than I probably do now, because part of those for me were about setting my energetic state and also sort of clearing the palate, as you were, after the meal, after the coaching session.
Sure.
I found that stuff was important. I didn't want to carry over anything from one coaching session to the next. I also didn't want to carry anything that, as coaches, we tend to be quite empathic people.
Yeah.
And so we can easily pick up on other people's emotional states. And sometimes we can carry that with us, especially if they're in a pretty bad place in whatever's going on with them. We can end up taking that with us. So it's really important. And I think a coach I used to learn from years ago called it kind of a psychic cleansing. Like, I'm not talking about psychics like crystal balls and stuff, but psychic from more the sort of mental perspective of cleanse your psyche, shake stuff off. Writing notes became that for me. Like, writing notes after a session became my palate cleanser, part of the ritual, and everything just ended up getting tied up into that. So I didn't really find that I had to do much more after a session. It's like, once I'd done my notes, it was closed off, and that became the ritual for me. The opening ritual, which is like intention setting and stuff like that, just became more automatic. So I think it probably still happens on an unconscious level, if that makes sense.
Sure. No, it definitely does. And honestly, those are skills, even though these are like lists of things that we do, ritualistic as you refer to them. I think that they're absolutely necessary. And I think a lot of the people listening, if they're not doing many, they might say, well, I'm only doing a few a week. I would still say practice it anyway, no matter how many you have. I've even made the joke of having some type of practice that you incorporate into your life so that you are present. This is where that presence comes in. If I just had an interaction with somebody that I live with, anybody in my family, good or bad, and I come into a session, there's no possibility that energy isn't showing up somehow, some way, whether you want to admit it or realize it or recognize it. And it doesn't mean that you're not going to deliver a good session, but I hold myself to a pretty high standard, and so do my clients as a result. Yeah. And I need to make sure that I am as on the money as I can possibly be, right? If I want to command a certain amount of income or program charge, like per session kind of a thing, I need to do everything in my power. So this is funny. I had surgery, 15 years ago on my neck, and in my throat. And I was so nervous. I mean, they were like, we're going to put a pretty big slice into your neck. And I just had this like vision of my head flopping off. I'm sorry. It's true. I really did. Anyhow, so when I walked into the OR, and there were 20 people in that room, and I was like, what are you all doing here? And they're like, oh, well, I'm doing this and this and this. And I was like, wow, this is a pretty big surgery. Let me just say this, right? It's not 3 people.
Five of them were just there to catch your head in case it fell off, right?
It's not even funny. I was petrified. But that's funny. Where's the basket? That would have been funny if they did that as a joke, like right at the base of the gurney. Oh, what's that for? Well, in case we overdo it. I'm like, oh, no. Oh, gosh. Anyhow, imagine how I felt. But anyway, and you know what I said to everybody? I go, all right, I just have one question. Everybody in a good mood? Everybody get enough sleep last night? Anybody have an argument with a spouse or a loved one this morning? Because if you did and are not, you need to go. Go find your replacement. I want everybody to be spry and ready to go. I actually had another visual of like baseball glove, like somebody sitting there with a basket in it. Okay, anyway, but we're going all over here. But you know what I'm talking about, right? Like it really was important to me. This is my point. It was very important to me to have these people that I was putting so much trust in to be ready just in case. Like I didn't want anybody sitting there with bleary eyes and cutting things they're not supposed to be cutting. So I know we're not as extreme and maybe we're not as important, but I think we are to people. I think that they rely on us to really help them, right? It's not just about what services do I provide. It's about them. Think about their perspective and the trust level. It's kind of what I was just getting to with my story about my head falling off.
it relates to state management. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
The thing that I'm not a big Tony Robbins fan. He obviously
Did he
has some
just
good
say
stuff.
that? I'm apologizing in advance.
I'm not a fan. I'm sorry. Yeah, I'm not saying he's not good at what he does and all that kind of stuff. Just not. It's not for me.
Where's the damn disclaimer? Like when you're about to watch a show and it says the opinions of the bloppity blah are not necessarily those of the network. I'm just saying.
John's opinions are not necessarily those of Angie's or other coaches.
Correct.
Yeah. However, he does talk about personal power. And when he's talking about personal power, he's talking about emotional state management. And it's one of the hardest things to do, to be able to try. I was having such a struggle with this myself on Monday. I'm just coming back from a bit of vacation time. There's been a lot of stuff going on and couldn't get my head in the game. And as I was trying to push through and work on my state management, all it was doing was giving me a headache. That wasn't good. Good. And then yesterday I'm on a group call with a bunch of clients and this was coming up for them. It was like there's an issue of one of them trying to get some stuff done and falling into old habits. So really what's going on here is a lot to do with state management as well. Of like, how do you want to be showing up and experiencing your day? Is it like there's this going on and that going on and so I feel like this? Or is it there's this going on and that going on, however, I'm choosing to feel like this and show up like this? Because it seems weird to other people around if there's shit going on in your life or in the world and you're, I'm happy, I couldn't be happier, life is wonderful. People will think you're weird. That's the reality of it. And yet those kinds of peak states are so critical for performance, for our performance, for being able to show up and do a good job. So what you say raises a really, really good point. If you've got crap going on in your life and you can't box that up for a while and step into who you need to be and manage your own emotional state that way, then you're not going to be able to operate at anything close to peak levels. And so if you can't do that, like today, Monday for me, if you'd wanted me to do this call on Monday, I'd have been like, no, my head's not in the game and I can't get it there today.
Yeah.
But today, yeah, great. State management is hard work. But you do have to be intentional about the states that you want and need to be in that work for you, that are right for you.
I agree, 10,000%. And something I want to say, and I don't think this is necessarily a skill, but you're, circling the drain on it, and I want to bring it up, is if you've had as a coach a major life event that you are not able to, because I don't believe in fake it till you make it. I just don't.
No, I don't.
So, because again, things will show up in places that you don't even recognize, and you don't know what will trigger you. So my thought is that, and here's the thing, workaholic, hero, let me do the things, had a death in the family and said, I'm still going to push through. There is no honor in that, because if you think that you're just like, I'm going to be fine, I can push through. No, you're full of it and you're deceiving yourself and therefore deceiving your client as well. So you really, it's not whether you can push through or not. I just feel like there are times when we need to say to ourselves, today's not the day. I can't do this today. I know they're relying on me, but part of my obligation to them is to give them my very best. And I know with certainty, under the circumstances, I'm a good enough coach. I could probably just fake my way through it, but that's not fair. So I'm going to be honest and say, hey, I did have a death in the family and I will be rescheduling. Like, just honor yourself. I knew somebody I have a coach friend who had surgery on a Thursday, and it was pretty major. I wouldn't say it was open heart, but it was definitely like discomfort and whatnot. And they didn't cancel any of their sessions for Friday. And I thought, why? What? So although it's not a skill set, maybe there's just some parameters that we need to set for ourselves to honor ourselves when it's necessary, right? I don't if a client says, oh, Angie, I need to cancel, I ask them why. I absolutely ask them why, because I've experienced situations where when the work gets tough, there's an avoidance And then they start making up, stories and excuses. So I do check in on that. And if I am going to reschedule something, I will give them a reason why, unless it's something like really none of their business, like, hey, I'm having surgery or I have a death in the family, something like that. I will be honest because I don't want them to think I'm just rescheduling. I want them to know that there's validity to it. But I just see I've seen several people thinking they were doing the best thing for their clients, and it really is not. So I don't know. It's not a skill,
it's
but
not.
Rule of thumb, maybe.
Yeah. No, isn't that weird? I mean, there's so much that relates to burnout culture. Maybe it would be good to talk about that at some point in the future, but how much we need to hustle or how much there's this idea of honor or success is about pushing yourself beyond your limits. And it's like, well, not always. Sometimes success is about challenging yourself and pushing past your limits, but also some self-care that we don't actually need to become martyrs to what we're doing.
There is a practice to, practicing what you preach. Not that we preach, but just using the saying. If I've actually had people that are super sick, I've had clients that are coming on with COVID and they're coughing every 3 seconds, and 10 minutes in, I'm like, we're done for today. You need to go take care of you. There is obviously this is not going to count toward your session.
Yeah. What you gonna do? What can you possibly get done this week when you actually just need to recuperate?
Sure.
Yeah, I'd be exactly the same in the session. I want to pivot a bit though.
Yes.
And talk about something that is unambiguously a skill, which is reframing as a coaching skill. Because I think maybe something like 90% or more of coaching is reframing.
Sure.
And it's a really important skill. What do you understand and practice by reframing, Angie?
I think it's just more of a pattern interrupt, if you think about it, right? Beliefs, stories, and the things that come along with that. So reframing, I think there's multitudes of ways to use that in coaching. So I can reframe a question to help bring light to an alternative perspective, right? I do a lot of what ifs. It's actually one of my things that I actually have a talk and a workshop on it. It's the what if shift, right? So it's just being able to offer up that alternative perspective, perception, because why are we here? Why do people come to coaching? Usually it's for beliefs and stories and how that translates into everyday life.
Yeah. I take very much the perspective of we are meaning-making machines and we're always looking to make meanings, but sometimes the meanings that we make are more based on negative opinions and experiences in our lives of ourselves than reality or whatever we choose to be reality. Like we have the ability to essentially have the same experience. Like we could both go to, I'm trying to think of a good example here. We could both go to Dollywood. That's not
okay.
I only say because it's somewhere that I'd love to go. We could both go to Dollywood and do I don't know what the rides are at Dollywood, but we could both look at some of Dolly's old wigs and outfits and maybe, I don't know, do a country karaoke session and stuff like that. And whatever else is there, I don't know, I really want to go. And we could both do exactly the same experience and we might come out of it at the end of the day and you've loved it and I've hated it. That could happen.
Right.
So what's different there? Just the perspective, just the attitude maybe that we've got in there with, or experience that we're carrying with us, or opinions of ourselves, or judgments that we're making at the time. That having the same experience does not necessarily lead to the same outcome, does not necessarily lead to the same perspective. And so I really say that's an important part of reframing. Is like we can always find new meanings in the judgments or decisions that we've already made about our lives and our experience.
Well,
and
isn't that
to me
what
is
it's
a big
about?
part of,
like
that's a
coaching,
big part of what
coaching.
I find. That's what I say. So much of reframing is just is coaching. It's like a huge part of the coaching equation of creating new decisions, creating new stories in your life, and to some degree, rewriting your story and taking lessons from negative experiences in your past into positive lessons instead rather than negative lessons. So you take something good away from those.
Yeah, no, but I think the first thing that we have to do, and you touched on it, is I can't tell you that you should love Dollywood. What do you mean you didn't love it? Some things are black and white. Well, I didn't love this. It was too hot. And that's very your thing. But I think when I'm trying to check in on somebody's specific perception of something, one of the questions I will ask them, is that true? Or I'll say, on a scale of 1 to 10, how true is that? And if they give me like, it's 8, and I go further and say, okay, because it's not that I'm trying to disprove anything. I'm trying to first of all, I'm trying to get a perspective of where they're actually at. And once I do that, then I can work toward an alternative. But I have to understand what they really perceive and to what level. So if they say, oh yeah, it's a level 8, I believe that I'm not worthy of love. Really? So define that. Like, how do you know you're a level 8? What does that look like? And I make them go through that. It's very uncomfortable because honestly, it's not true, right? I'm not lovable. Okay, well, show me that. How true is that? How do you know? Now, obviously, they had a parent that was like, you're not lovable their whole lives. That's why they believe that. And that's not me. That's therapy. But what I do is I try to quantify it to some degree so that they can have this, oh, wait, 1 to 10? Oh, well, maybe only 3. And that's good for them. And say, okay, well, then tell me the ways that you are lovable. What's lovable about you? Right? Yeah. Just without saying, well, I want you to think differently, so let me ask you this. I just ask them. So I think that's a big piece of it, is quantifying it for them. I use a lot of 1 to 10 in my coaching. And I know there are some people that when they hear it, they go, oh, really? Like 1 to 10? How much do you love me on a scale of 1 to 10? 35, baby. But it's really just to help give a perspective to both the client and the coach. Yeah, there's that.
I think another thing that I find very much a skill, and I've met something I try to be better at, and I've met some people who are amazingly good at this, is the skill of metaphor. Utilizing metaphor and story in directing coaching. It's sometimes hard to come up with stuff on the spot, but there are some sort of standard or regular metaphors that we can often find ourselves using, or we'll probably refer to quite often.
Yes.
But the ability to actually come up with a whole metaphor situation can actually be, it can end up being an intervention if you're especially good at it. I wouldn't say I'm quite at that level when it comes to metaphor, but it is a really powerful coaching skill that I would encourage all coaches to get better at.
Absolutely, because it gives that visual kind of, there's one that I use pretty often, and it's a go-to for me for people who are stuck, right? And they just keep coming back to the same, and they're like, I just don't know why. And I go, so let me ask you, do you drive? Yes. You've driven a car? Yes. Did you ever hit a detour? Yes. Oh. So did you turn off the car and sit there and wait for the detour to end? And I'm like, well, no. Well, what did you do? I followed the signs if there were. Did you ever come across one that didn't have signs? I see it all the time here in Arizona, by the way. And you just kind of figure it out. And you make a dozen wrong turns. And we're like the cul-de-sac capital of probably the United States. So it takes a lot of cul-de-sac and turning around. But the point that you're making is keep going, because you might trip and fall or go the wrong way to get to your destination, but eventually you will get there. If you sit there and do nothing, then you're going to guarantee that you're going to sit there and do nothing. Nothing's going to change. That is one that I use. And it always comes back, because I say to them, you will now remember this for the rest of your life, because I said so. When you feel stuck.
I think one of the ones I use most commonly is the sort of parable of the Chinese farmer, the one where it's like some good things happen, some bad things, and neighbors come around and say, oh, that's good, or what a lucky man. He says, we'll see. And then something seemingly bad happens. Oh, how unlucky and how unfortunate. He says, we'll see. every answer is we'll see, because something else follows on from that determines like the thing that seemed unlucky before actually was good, and the thing that seemed good before ends up being unlucky. You just don't know. And so I want people to get out of that sort of thing of, oh, this is good, this is bad, or because it's not what I want in the moment. Like, you don't know. So this is still like, well, this is interesting. Doesn't completely change everything, but it's a different perspective. Well, this isn't just bad, it's just interesting. It's like, well, there's things to figure out here. And you don't know ultimately whether the things that are happening in your life are going to be good or bad, whether they're going to work for your better interests or not. So I use that one a lot. Metaphors, certainly in stories, can be really powerful. It's like they can be whole interventions in themselves. Metaphors more commonly are really just helping your clients to make the connections between things as well. So when you very often use things, well, it's a bit like this. That's a metaphor, and it helps them to understand it. It's a bit like a stopped clock that's it's at least right twice a day. But those.
There it is.
Those.
I haven't heard that in a minute.
Just those kinds of things that can help people to make mental connections. Food connections can be pretty good for that, because we all commonly have and like food. There's so many different things to choose from. But your job as a coach is to be the guide, and is to help lead them to the connections that they need to make.
Right.
And help get them to the understanding they want to get. So sometimes just saying something directly can sound a bit too clinical. You want to put it more in terms of it's like this, or put it more into a story where it's going to be more memorable for them as well. That takes them out of, you're just telling me things, you're just telling me information.
Absolutely.
You're not anymore just telling them information.
Listen, they don't need us to tell them what to do. There's a skill. Don't tell your clients what to do. That is not, you're not their mama. Don't tell people what to do. Even if they ask, Angie, what do you think I should do? I'm not you. I can't answer that for you, right? This has to be your answer, whatever. But don't tell people what to do. That's a skill, because I think there's a lot of coaches out there that want to listen. Certainly we see things from a different perspective. And I've been caught in this a couple of times where I thought I knew whether it was like a best next step or what the outcome could be, right? A good outcome could be. And you know what? That was unfair, because what they deemed as a good outcome and what I deemed as a good outcome were not the same. You're not a consultant. We've talked about that before. You're not here to say, hey, this is where you should invest your money, right? If you want to do this, this is what you should do. No, it's not could, should. It's how do you perceive this? That's how you get the longer lasting results, I feel like. You know what I mean? It's like, you need to figure this out for yourself, but I'm here to help you do that. Understand, I'm not here to tell you what to do. Or I've actually had a couple of clients reframe it and say, well, what would you do if you were in that position? Or what should I do, right? And then they'll go, well, what would you do if you were in that position? I'm not, you are, let's talk about that.
Or what I've done when that happens to me is, okay, let's say I'm in that position. What would you advise me to do?
Exactly.
You're the coach now. You tell me, what should I do?
Right. Yeah, it's definitely, I've done that a couple of times, actually. It's a good reminder, a cool alternative perspective. You know, just shifting. Like, you really have your own answers. You're just afraid to.
I think, there's probably a lot more skills that we could potentially get into, but for the sake of time, we probably should start wrapping things up. But I do think there's certainly things like being able to align values and things like that. That's definitely a skill that can be quite helpful sometimes, but not always essential in every coaching session. And a bunch of other stuff that probably people might come back at us with as well. We are going to do some deeper dive into individual episodes that will be about some of the particular skills and how we've developed them, or what we might even recommend for you for advancing them for yourself. And hopefully they will prove to be very valuable for you as well.
I'd be curious as to how the audience, like, what do they struggle with as coaches, right? For those who are already established, what is it that you struggle with? Oh, I'd love to hear what they feel like they need to be working on to be a better coach. What skills specifically?
Well, you can let us know. And the best way to do that is to leave us a voicemail. Certainly at the moment, that's the best way. And to do that, all you need to do is go to speakpipe.com, speakpipe.com/the Coaching Clinic podcast. And you can leave us a voicemail there. Let us know. what are the coaching skills that you struggle with, or what are the coaching skills maybe we've mentioned today that you think, oh, I'm not very good at that. How do I get better at it? Let us know where you're feeling challenged with your skills to coach, or are you worried that there are skills that you don't even know that you think you should have?
Here you go.
Or that you're feeling a bit too fresh and green and don't know if you're heading in the right direction. Let us know. We want to be a guide for you on your coaching business journey. And we would love to hear from you. And if we like your message, we might even feature you on the show.
Yeah, that'd be such a good time. Come on.
So we'll be back next week with another sparkling episode of the Coaching Clinic. But until then, we hope you have an amazing week, and we look forward to hearing from you.
Bye for now.